When you're a child, you often don't know what makes a thing good or bad. This is a common thing, to be honest, because when you're that young, you like anything that gets thrown into your face. I myself liked things that I later said that I didn't like. I'm not afraid to admit it. I liked things such as Johnny Test or the annoying orange. But later on in life, you look back and say, wow, that was awful. And well, there are plenty of shows and movies nowadays that I look back nowadays and say, holy cow, why did I like that movie back then? However, the subject of today's review is a film that even back during the time of its release, I absolutely did not want to watch, because I knew that was going to be bad going in. That movie is Walking with Dinosaurs 2013. And holy moly, I'm glad that I avoided this movie as much as I could because good god it is awful. To put it in context, alongside Ivan the Incredible, Walking with Dinosaurs is a movie that, even judging from the trailers, I knew was going to be stupid and not fun to watch in the slightest, even at the time. And back during that point in time, I liked a lot of bad or stupid movies, and this was the movie that drew the line for me personally. At the time, I liked films like Escape from Planet Earth and The Nut Job, and so that's not a good sign at all for this movie. But that's just the trailers, as I hear you guys type in the comments, and that's completely fair, so I'll say this right now. Walking with Dinosaurs 2013 is one of those movies where the movie is just as bad as how the trailers and marketing made it out to be, and that's not an exaggeration. So, what is the issue with Walking with Dinosaurs 2013? Well, on the surface of it, there doesn't seem to be many issues, as the film looks absolutely gorgeous. In fact, this movie has some of the best animation out of all the animated movies that I've seen in Sean's yearly reviews so far, and how extremely realistic and detailed the dinosaurs look, especially in comparison to what we've seen in Disney's Dinosaur, and probably even the Walking with Dinosaurs miniseries. And the writing, while simple, doesn't have jumbled up or incoherent writing like some of the other animated films I reviewed so far. And even though this movie was completely ruined by one specific thing I'm gonna get to shortly, I can see what the movie is trying to go for. Despite being a story between two brothers and a love triangle between the both of them, as the movie was clearly wanting to be a heartwarming story that shows the life of a young dinosaur named Patchy. But what is wrong with this movie exactly? 2 words: the audio. Despite the fact that the animation in this movie is absolutely gorgeous, what ruined any sort of merit that this movie could have had is this movie's god-awful voiceovers. You see, what this movie was originally going to be was what The Land Before Time and Disney's Dinosaur were wanting to be. That being, a film that was completely silent. But just like those films, this movie decided to have all of them talk so that the kids could understand what's going on. However, at least those movies had the characters move their mouths while talking, and in the case of The Land Before Time, it had moments where characters would stop for a second so that the emotional scenes hit better. This movie, on the other hand, does not do that. This movie has so little faith in its demographic to the point where it really does show, and just reeks of executive meddling, and them thinking that children have very low attention spans to the point of treating the audience like absolute idiots. But that completely failed, because the movie ended up being a box office disappointment and alienated fans of the miniseries. And like I stated before, I refused to watch this movie when I was literally 12 years old, not even being a teenager yet. That just shows how much this movie failed. And if this movie was specifically doing this because of the contents that the film presents to the audience, that aspect was a complete failure because there are parts of the film where dinosaurs tear other dinosaurs apart on screen. So this movie also fails to appeal to the audience that it's pandering to. In all honesty, I'd rather watch a 4Kids anime dub than this, because 4Kids dubs can at least have ironic enjoyment, and they're at least consistent. Everyone knows about the iconic rice ball incident in the Pokemon anime, where they decided to claim that rice balls were jelly donuts.
These donuts are great! Jelly-filled are my favorite! Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut!
Walking with Dinosaurs is just obnoxious, and I'm honestly glad that I avoided this movie at the time, because I don't know what this movie could have done to my brain had I went with the decision to watch it. Because I first watched this movie when I was 16, and this movie was an insult to my intelligence, and I felt that part of my brain cells were rotting after watching it. The obvious problem that this movie has with the god-awful audio is that it sounds like a riff track that someone would make if they're bored with the movie, so they'd narrate over it to make fun of what would happen on screen, like something that you'd see in Mystery Science Theater 3000. But this is actually real and was able to be released in theaters. But this is just inexcusable, because coming from a big studio like 20th Century Fox, they should have known better than to do this. I'd expect this from Lionsgate or the Weinstein Company, because they put out films like Norm of the North or Dougal, but 20th Century Fox? Just no. Once again, if an at the time 12-year-old is able to pick up on this issue, you have a problem. And the other problem with the audio in this movie is that it never shuts up. It reminds me a lot of the Miramax cut of The Thief and the Cobbler, where it had so little faith in its audience being able to understand what either the thief or the cobbler are saying that they decided to have them narrate everything, when they would have been fine without it. However, that movie could at least be salvaged without it. Walking with Dinosaurs, I doubt could even be salvaged even without this, given that there are legitimate writing issues in this movie. You know how Shea Frillis pointed out with Dinosaur that the film was basically just characters walking all throughout the runtime? That's exactly what this movie does. And the movie is just your standard kid has to grow up without the parent plotline that we've seen before in films like Bambi or The Lion King. But instead of being cute or emotional, it ends up being infuriating because of the horrendous voiceovers. And the characters are even more unlikable because they just won't stop talking! There is one exception to this, because even without the voices, one sequence in this movie rubs me in such a wrong way, to the point where it actually makes me angry thinking about it. Patchy's brother, Scowler, in this movie, decides that after taking charge of the herd, he has all of them walk through a lake of ice, and when the dinosaurs end up falling into the water because of Scowler, Patchy ends up having to save all of them so they won't end up getting killed, since it was about to become spring. And Scowler has the gall to get upset because Patchy wanted to keep them safe. Bruh! You put all of them in danger! You have no right to get mad at your brother for doing the right thing, because it's common sense to not walk on a lake of ice! Especially when it's about to become spring! And the fact that they talk makes it much worse. What this movie decided to do was look at the open wound, rub a lemon on it, and then pour a bunch of salt on the open wound. And last but not least, the live-action wraparound segment at the beginning of the film is completely pointless, as it hardly has any sort of connection with the rest of the movie. I mean, there's the sequence where the dinosaur loses his tooth, but what does the life of Patchy have anything to do with this paleontologist looking for dinosaur bones? And this segment only appears at the beginning and ending of the movie. The middle parts are just focusing on the life of this random dinosaur, and when the dinosaur loses his tooth, it's so late into the movie that you probably would have forgotten about this. So overall, Walking with Dinosaurs 2013 is just awful. The only reason as to why I don't think that this movie is as bad as either The Wild or the Rodfellows movie is because this movie got ruined by the executives, while those two films don't even have an excuse. This movie is easily the worst animated movie released in 2013, no competition. Freebirds at least has the memes going for it, Planes is just kind of boring and forgettable, and Escape from Planet Earth and Turbo were just generic at worst. Walking with Dinosaurs 2013 is a film that I would actively deem unwatchable, at least from the version of the film that was released in theaters. And when there had to be a version of the movie that had to get rid of all of this, that speaks volumes of how awful this movie is. In which case, I'd recommend staying as far away from the theatrical cut of the movie and just stick with the Cretaceous cut of the film, which gets rid of all of the voiceovers from the movie. Trust me, it will save you from the pain and headache that you'd have to endure through with the voiceover version. Since I can't find anything else to say about this film, I might as well end this review with a classic quote from Billy Madison. Walking with Dinosaurs 2013, what you just showed the audience is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling and incoherent runtime was there even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in your audience is now dumber for having to listen to it. I award you a 2 out of 10, and may God have mercy on your soul.